Hey everyone, it's Dr. Trevor back with you. Happy Monday to you today. So we are doing Mindset Monday. Mindset Monday. So over the last couple of weeks, as we're well into the Christmas season, a few things we've been doing. First of all, for many of you, you've been joining us for our 14-day Less Stressed challenge, and we're so grateful to have you in there. Not only doing the challenge with us, but for many of you being a part of the community experience of it, right? By adding comments, responding to comments. So love that you're doing it. If you're not in the challenge, there's still time. We're halfway through the challenge. I think today is day 7, right? Day 7 of the 14-day challenge. If you're wondering where to find the challenge, it's on the platform, so you can find it through our site, or you can download our app. By the way, if you've never downloaded our app, go to our app stores. You just look up Live Well app, and you're going to find it. You're going to see our logo. You're going to see our app. Would love to have you do that. It's an easy and accessible way for you to experience and consume our content. Okay, so as I mentioned about the Christmas season, I don't know how many about you, but I think about the Christmas season. We also know it is the season of Advent, right? The time leading up to Christmas. I was in church this last week, and I think they lit the 3rd candle of Advent. And it's the candle that represents joy. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about cultivating a mindset of joy. So here's what I want you to do as we kind of begin today. And I just want you to take a moment and just think about a moment sometime in this last week that maybe brought you joy. Think about that. Something that happened this last week, a moment, an experience. Could have been a person you were with, could have been a place you were at, could have been a thing you were experiencing. As I think about that this last week, I have several of them, but one that comes to mind. I remember getting home after work, coming in, putting my stuff down, looking out our back windows of the house, which overlooks kind of the patio and the pool, and behind that, this really cool pond. And I remember seeing like the sun starting to set. So I remember grabbing a beverage from the fridge, asking my wife Mindy if she'd come out, and we sat in our Adirondack chairs, and we just had a few moments together. Like we just sat, we sipped a drink, we checked in with each other, and we got to watch the sunset. And I remember that being, not only was it a meaningful moment of connection for Mindy and I, but it was a really incredible moment of joy. In fact, I remember in that moment, what was joyful about it is it just gave me this like heartfelt experience of gratitude. Gratitude about the experience that I could have sitting there watching the sunset with my wife, but it was also just the sense of gratitude. I think for me as a believer, the gratitude of like, man, God is a God of creation. He's a God who created all things. He's a God who makes all things, and this beautiful sunset that he was making, and we get to experience it as it was setting. Just hearing myself tell that story it's a reminder to me that some of the greatest things in life, are super simple. Right? The ability to watch a sunset, or the intentionality to sit with someone, connect with them, check in with them, and have a meaningful conversation. Okay, so as I mentioned today in our time for Mindset Monday, we're going to talk about cultivating a joyful mindset, which I think that just begs the question, like, what does joy mean? Like, what does joy mean to you? So when we think about that, I think it's helpful to kind of maybe give a definition to what is joy. I think it's important to clarify, what's the difference between joy and happiness? So I wrote this down. I just want to read it to you. Let me start with this. Happiness. Happiness is often tied to external circumstances. Happiness is often tied to external circumstances. Happiness is what happens outside of us. Happiness is oftentimes happens to us, right? So we might be happy that we got a gift. We might be happy that we got a promotion at work. We might be happy that we got to hang out with someone, or we got to go to a certain place, or we got to do a certain thing, or there was happiness, right? That surrounds us. In fact, we live here in Florida. That's where our clinics are here at LiveWell, and we're not that far from what we've known for decades to be the happiest place on earth. Right? If you know what I'm talking about Disney. Right? Disney has capitalized on this concept. Right? This idea that happiness is outside of us. Happiness is some external circumstance. Okay, so what makes that different than joy? Joy is an inner state of contentment and gratitude, independent of external events. Joy is an inner state of contentment and gratitude, independent of external events. And there's so many examples of this, but yesterday, when I went to church, I got to go see this really cute little Christmas pageant, right? There's all these kids on stage, and it was crazy and it was chaotic, but it's also one of the cutest things you ever get to experience, right? Have you ever seen one of those before? Yeah, I love those. So there's this kids pageant that's happening. Okay, so as that was happening, it reminded me back to the original Christmas story. Right, so here's Mary and Joseph. Life is crazy and chaotic, right? They travel to Bethlehem. They can't find a place. They end up staying in what we know as a stable or a barn, or more likely, actually, it was probably more like a cave, right? There's animals around. It stinks. It's a busy city because people are coming for the census. There's just all sorts of crazy going on all around them. Right, we find out in the midst of that story, there's angels that are coming down from heaven. Right, there's shepherds who come rushing into the town after they saw the shepherds out in the fields. Right, there's all these people gathering around, and there's all of this going on. And there's this verse that says, there's this idea of Mary. Mary has a moment in all the midst of the chaos, in the midst of the crazy, where she has this moment of joy, this moment of contentment and gratitude. So independent of all that's going around, right? She has this moment where she experiences joy. Man, so I was watching this pageant yesterday, and it was a little chaotic and crazy there too, right? There's these kids running around, and half of them don't know what they're doing, and they're supposed to be doing actions. They're supposed to remember their lines, and they're in a really cute and wonderful way. It's not perfect. But I remember feeling that yesterday, sitting watching the imperfection of a kid's Christmas pageant, having a moment of joy. So again, this idea of happiness is often tied to external circumstances. Joy is an inner state of contentment and gratitude. So I think it's helpful if we tie this into the idea of the science of joy. So positive psychology, they released this data. It says research shows that practicing gratitude increases dopamine and serotonin levels, boosting feelings of well-being. Okay, so maybe not shocking to us, maybe not surprising, right? But this idea that research shows that practicing gratitude increases dopamine and serotonin levels, boosting feelings of well-being. Remember, before, as I mentioned, joy is an inner state of contentment, and there's that word, gratitude. Man, gratitude is so potent and so important in our well-being, right? So practicing gratitude increases dopamine and serotonin levels, boosting feelings of well-being, right? So in a scientific way, we'd experience this idea of this dopamine rush and this serotonin push as an experience we call joy. Neuroplasticity is this other part of the science of joy. So it says repeated focus on joy rewrites the brain to notice and appreciate positive moments more naturally. Did you catch that? It's this idea, the more we practice it, right, the focus on joy, what rewrites the brain to notice and appreciate positive moments more naturally. The more we practice joy, the more joyful we feel, is the simple idea of this, the paraphrase. The more joy we practice, the more joy we experience. Okay, So if we think about this in just a really practical way in our lives, I want to talk about tools to cultivate joy. Okay, the first one I already shared, which is just simply this idea of practicing gratitude. So it might be helpful to us. What is gratitude? Gratitude is the practice of recognizing and appreciating what we have. In our working definition of joy just a few moments ago, we tied that to the idea of contentment. Right? Recognizing and appreciating what we have. So here's what I'd love for you to do as you maybe think about it today or into the week ahead. Write down 3 things you're grateful for. Write them down. So be as specific as possible. So rather than just saying, I'm thankful for my family, right, or I'm thankful for my spouse, like be specific. Like I'm thankful for the moments I get to sit at the dining room table and have interactions and connections with my family, or I'm grateful for my spouse who wakes up every morning, makes coffee, gets it ready for when I come down, and I desperately need some caffeine. Okay, a second really important part to think about cultivating mindset of joy is this. It's reframing negative thoughts. Reframing negative thoughts. So reframing is the practice of viewing a situation or a circumstance through a different and often more positive lens. That's what reframing is. So when situations happen, right, it's our ability and our commitment to be able to look through that situation through a different lens, right? A lens that is maybe more grace-filled, more patient, and ultimately more positive. So here's an example. In fact, I've had this recently. So the situation is I'm stuck in traffic, right? And you're like, oh no, can't believe I'm stuck in traffic. Okay, so how might we reframe I'm stuck in traffic? It might be oh good. Now, why would we ever say, oh good, I'm stuck in traffic? Reframing would say something like, oh good, I get to listen to the rest of my podcast. Or, oh good, I'm able to make a phone call while I'm sitting here. Or, oh good, I'm getting really good gas mileage going 10 miles an hour rather than 80 miles an hour, right? Whatever it is, right? Reframing allows us to think of situations that might be less than perfect, reframe them in a way that is positive. Okay, so you can practice this. You can practice today. You can practice in the week ahead. Think about it in this way. When you have those oh no moments, oh no, this happened again. Oh no, this is taking place. Oh no, I got to go do that. Is to shift that oh no into a oh good, right? And then just start in thinking about what in the world could be good about the otherwise not so good circumstance. All right, the next one in cultivating a mindset of joy is practicing mindfulness. Now, if you've joined us in the past for our Mindset Mondays, we've actually done that. We've practiced mindfulness. What is mindfulness? Our ability to be present. To be present with our thoughts, our feelings, our bodies, our ability to be present, and not just with ourselves, our ability to be present with other people, our environments, our surroundings. Okay, so here's a way you might be able to do that. In fact, let's just do it together right now. So I want you to close your eyes for a second. And I want you to think of a joyful memory. Whether it was the one that you thought of when I asked you to think of a memory from this last week, and maybe it's that one. Maybe it's a different one. Close your eyes and think of a joyful memory. Now we're going to engage our senses for a second. So if you go back in that memory, what did it look like? Like, maybe where were you? Who were you with? What was the surroundings or the environment of that? Okay, just picture that. Second, I want you to consider in that memory that we're holding on to right now, what did it smell like, right? Were there smells of, you were gathered at Thanksgiving and you could smell the food on the table or coming from the kitchen, or maybe it was a recent memory of you. Maybe it was still food. Maybe you're making Christmas cookies, or you're making a gingerbread house, or maybe it was a memory of having coffee with a friend, and you can the smells of the coffee shop, or the cup that's in front of you, or maybe you went to go cut a Christmas tree, and you can smell the pine. Whatever it might be. Next, I want you to consider what did it feel like? What did it feel like? I mean, consider two ways it could feel. It could physically feel like what were you touching? What were you feeling? Maybe that's connected to the temperature. Was it cold out? Was it warm out? Right? Were you touching or holding something or someone? Right? What did it feel like? But there's another way we could ask that question. What did it internally feel like? Like, what was the emotional experience in that joyful memory? Now, we might think of joy as the emotion, but think about it in this way. What other kind of emotional experience showed up for you? We talked about gratitude. We talked about contentment. We talked about happiness. Maybe it's those. Maybe there's something else. What did it feel like for you in that memory? Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Is we're going to take what we walked through, right, with our eyes still closed. Right, what did it look like? What did it smell like? What did it feel like? And I just want you to, for just a few seconds, I just want you to play that out. I want you to go back and replay this memory, paying attention to what it looked like, what it smelled like, and what it felt like. Go ahead and do that. Yeah. Okay. Just want to give one more practical way which we can cultivate a mindset of joy, and that is the idea of acts of kindness. Like acts of kindness, and the idea of like joyful living, like playing it out every day. Joyful living practices, let's call it that. In fact, there's actually probably a few of them that we can kind of come up with. This first one, as I mentioned, acts of kindness, right? Simply doing something kind for someone else. What we find to be true about this in our experience and in all the data is not only when we do something kind for someone does it make them more joyful, it actually makes us more joyful, right? When we can practice kindness towards someone else. So whether it's leaving a note of appreciation for a coworker, whether it's buying a cup of coffee for the person in the line behind you at the coffee shop, whether it's calling a friend and just checking in with them and then letting them know how much they mean to you, right? Anything we can do, an act of kindness. Now, as I'm thinking about this joyful living practices, as we're calling it, a few other things. This idea of maybe practice like daily, like a daily joy habit. Okay, so what would that look like? Maybe it's this idea of spending 5 minutes a day, like just getting out a journal and just writing down, what is it that I'm thankful for? What is it that I'm excited about? What is it that I have to look forward to? Right? If we did that every day, that would be an example of a small habit. Or one of the ways, at least I know that I do it, is every night before I go to bed, right? I pray. And when I pray, I thank God. Thank God for what happened that day, or I thank God for how he's providing in my life, or I try to do my best just to keep a healthy framework of God's work in the midst of all that's going on. It's this idea of practicing gratitude in a very tangible, practical way every day. Okay, maybe this last way that we can joyfully practice every day is finding beauty in the little things. Okay, it's tying it back to this idea of mindfulness. Finding beauty in the little things. It's literally the idea of stopping and smelling the roses. It's the ability to pause in the present. Remember the idea of mindfulness? Pause in the present. To just look up in the sky. Like I told the story about that joyful moment when Mindy and I got to watch the sunset. Or maybe there's an airplane going by, and when they do it, sometimes it leaves that cool stream like behind them, which looks like a cloud, but we know it's not. Right? Or the ability to just go for a walk and like just pay special attention to the things around you. Or when we spend time with other people, right? Like finding beauty in the small moments. All right, so as we think about these things, and just want to kind of recap this idea for us as we talked about joy, cultivating a joyful mindset. Again, we talked about the difference between happiness and joy. So like happiness, this idea is it's often external, it's outside of us. Rather than joy, joy is something that happens inside of us, it's internal. Right, so our happiness is maybe an emotion or an experience, or we talked about these examples of it's a promotion, it's a gift, it's something that happens to us. Whereas joy is something that happens in us. We talked about the idea of it being connected to contentment, connected to gratitude. We talked about the idea of the science of joy and how when we actually practice more joy, it brings more joy. And then these tools to cultivate. Talked about practicing gratitude. Talked about reframing negative thoughts. We talked about practicing mindfulness. We talked about joyful living practices, like intentionally doing an act of kindness where in our effort to bring more joy to someone else's life, it actually brings more joy to our lives. We talked about the daily joy habits, the idea of spending 5 minutes every morning to write down what we're excited about, or maybe at the end of the day to pray, to thank God with gratitude for the things that happened that day. Mentioned this idea of finding beauty in the small things, right? That we slow down, that we're able to be present with intentionality. So as you go about today, as you go about this week ahead, in the midst of the craziness we often experience in the holidays, in the increased stress that we so often find ourselves in, right? With all the other strategies that we've talked through, whether it's in Mindful Monday, or it's Wellness Wednesday, or it's Faithful Friday, or what we're currently in the middle of our 14-day less stressed holiday challenge. It's really important for us to cultivate this idea of joy. And again, not that joy happens from things that are external, but joy comes from that inner place. Like we talked about on Faithful Friday, and we're going to talk about it again this Friday, about how all of these things are interconnected. We talked last week in Faithful Friday, we talked about hope. The week before that, we talked about peace. So tying that to joy happens inside of us. It comes from that place within. Right, through those things we talked about. Right, peace, hope, things we added today, contentment, gratitude. So I encourage you today, encourage you this week, be intentional. Right, slow down, be present, focus in with intent. Pay attention to the little things. Offer kindness to others, right? All the things that we just walked through together. As you think about not only a less stressed holiday, but a more joy-filled Christmas. All right, it's great to be with you guys. As I mentioned earlier, if you're not in the 14-day less stress holiday challenge, you can still do that. We're 1 week in. We still have 1 week to go. If you're joining here live, you can add a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Know that Dr. Mike's going to be with us on Wednesday for Wellness Wednesday, 12:15 Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to be back with us for Faithful Friday, same time, 12:15 Eastern Standard Time. All right, hope you guys have a joy-filled